Pokémon is firmly in its open world era right now, and although Scarlet and Violet's approach of go any way you want did not yet get rid of a certain canon order of doing things, it did stop Pokémon from being so linear it needs roadblocks to avoid you going somewhere unwanted. Legends Arceus still had a very small amount, like the member of the Galaxy Expedition team who prevents you from crossing a bridge during your first visit to the Obsidian Fieldlands, but this could very well turn out to be one of the last true roadblocks in Pokémon history. They'll never be completely gone. You could even make the argument that the obstacles like sludge piles and rocks as seen in Legends ZA qualify, as some of them do function as roadblocks when you cannot yet have a Pokemon to remove them, but I don't think those are really the same as the guys that are just dancing for no reason and will one day just leave for no reason. By that point, the Game Freak had just completely given up on being subtle and thinking of logical reasons why we can't pass, and funnily enough, I think that in that pure boldness, borderline meta-level commentary, they actually found something great. I've seen plenty of people say that this is one of their favorite roadblocks in the series. Because that's the thing, roadblocks are not a bad thing per se. Every linear game ever needs a way to make a game linear and prevent you from progressing, that's only natural. But the way in which that is done? That can differ a lot between hilarious, great, sensible, but also just lazy or nonsensical. And in its many years, Pokémon has had every single one of these at least once. Hell, just the first games have all of them at least once. Pokémon Red and Blue are jam-packed with roadblocks of all varieties. The most prevalent and recurring one, to the point you may sometimes even forget it's a roadblock, are HMs. You can't reach Cinnabar Island without Surf, you can't reach Vermilion Gym without Cut, etc. And in a way, this is a very conflicting one to look at because, well, I am definitely in the camp that strongly disliked HMs, and I'm very glad we don't need to use them anymore. I think that as roadblocks, they're really good. It's a very natural and uncontrived way of blocking your path that fits very well with the grand adventure vibe Pokemon is going on. Of course you need something to cross that ocean, that makes perfect sense. Same with a Pokemon capable of moving boulders to explore caves or occasionally cut down a tree. Now, I don't have to tell you, of course, how incredibly annoying it is from a moveset and team building perspective, but as a roadblock, I really like it. And it hasn't really disappeared either. Scarlet and Violet still kinda do this by having your Koraidon or Miraidon learn new movement options as the story progresses. Never is that really a pure, true roadblock like HMs and older games are, but in spirit it still exists, and if it were to take a hint from Legends EA and make it so you wouldn't need specifically Cut to remove trees, but say any bug, fighting, fire or flying type move, as long as it deals damage, I wouldn't mind them experimenting with this again in the future. HMs were always flawed as a game mechanic, but as a roadblock they're arguably among the best. But I say among the best because I don't think it is the absolute peak of the idea. That is something else that has existed since Gen 1, then returned in Gens 2 and 3, before kinda being abandoned, unfortunate as I think that is. I'm talking about Pokémon Roadblocks, as in, a Pokémon is a roadblock and you can then catch it. Snorlax is still well known for this practice, to the point it was brought back for nostalgia points in Gen 6 and even referenced as recently as Scarlet and Violet, but Sudowoodo from Gen 2 and Kecleon from Gen 3 definitely also qualify. Sudowoodo especially deserves more credit for how cool this moment is. It might be hard to imagine if you've never lived in a world where Sudowoodo wasn't a new Pokemon, but when Gen 2 released, I was playing through it as a kid, and it was genuinely mind-blowing that that weird tree was a Pokemon, let alone a rock type pretending to be a tree. Not to mention that, unlike with Snorlax and Kecleon, you only get one chance to catch this Sudowoodo. It's nothing short of a legendary in that regard. Well, I'm still very positive about Kecleon's inclusion in Gen 3 and how it being invisible makes it a very cool roadblock that really cements Kecleon as a memorable Pokemon. The fact Kecleon was already announced and had even appeared in the anime before the release of Ruby and Sapphire makes it less impactful to an extent. Plus, this is not the only Kecleon, it lives on several routes in Hoenn. Going forward, Pokemon as roadblocks did continue to exist, but never again were we able to catch them, which in and of itself can be seen as something that Gen 1 also introduced with the Ghost of Lavender Tower. Gen 4 had the Horde of Psyduck, which had to be moved with the Secret Medicine, a cute enough roadblock, but by the time Black and White 2 did it again with the group of Crustle, it started to get a little formulaic, especially since the cool benefit of being able to catch the Pokemon was removed. It did return one more time though to make for what might end up being the last truly memorable roadblock, being the group of Wooloo at the start of Sword and Shield. And hey, I can't say the game is wrong, I definitely wouldn't want to disturb them. But let's get back to Kanto for a second, because it wasn't just Pokemon blocking our path, the native people also know exactly what to do to halt our progress. The honor of being the series' first roadblock goes to the Old Man of Viridian City, who lies on the ground in the center of town because of coffee, wink wink. Or rather, because he hasn't had his morning coffee yet and is grumpy. Once you've been a good delivery person and brought the parcel to Oak, he's out of the way and teaches you how to catch Pokemon in exchange. Another famous roadblock from the original games are the guards that stop you from entering Saffron City until you quench their thirst. Funnily enough, well known as this one is, I feel like people have kinda started misremembering how this sequence actually goes. Quite some folk seem to think that these are just some lousy guys who refuse to let people in just because they are thirsty, but that's actually not the case at all. The opposite is true. They are doing their job. The Team Rocket invasion is why the city is not allowing anyone inside, and what you're doing is effectively bribing them to get in anyway. It's not "I'm thirsty, you can't pass", it's "the city is on lockdown, you can't pass". Unless you slide me a cup of tea under the counter. That may make them lousy guards, sure, but they're not some kind of super egocentric people who merely want you to fetch them a drink. And that still isn't all the roadblocks Kanto has to offer. We haven't even mentioned the guy who stops you from leaving Pewter City before defeating Brock, how Cycling Road is inaccessible until you have a bike, and another one of my favorites, the house in Cerulean City that has been broken into and you're not allowed to enter because it's a crime scene. Sure, it's just as overt a roadblock as some of these other ones, but it's very unique. It feels grander than just a roadblock. After all, when you're eventually allowed inside, you see the mess the house is now, complete with unique sprites for the footprints, and you get to defeat the thief yourself, making this almost feel like a sort of short side quest, rather than a simple blockade. Another in a somewhat similar camp is the scientist found at Hoenn's Oldale town, who is investigating rare footprints when you initially pass by, blocking the path to Route 102. I remember this also feeling like a really cool moment. Especially since, starting with Gen 2, footprints were added to the Pokédex, so this was already an established thing, and the idea that Gen 3 would expand on it right from the get-go was not unthinkable. But alas, the side quest potential never came to fruition. After you've beaten your rival, the scientist has moved aside, awkwardly revealing it was actually his own footprints he had been researching. Yeah, definitely a bit of an anticlimax. Another one you could consider part of this category is the Stoutland that's blocking the road in Heya Heya City in Sun and Moon. While this is factually just a simple, boring "you can't pass because I'm here now", I do like that it essentially teases, in a way, the Stoutland Surge ride Pokemon that would come later in the game. So in a way, this is kinda the footprint scientist done right, where a roadblock does actually tease something you can soon do yourself and engage with should this roadblock have made you excited. But there's no denying that, especially as time went on, more and more roadblocks started to feel forced. Black and White managed to avoid this to some extent by playing coy, like with the aforementioned dancers, but also the closure of Tube Line Bridge in Black and White 2 until you've beaten the Hall of Fame, with the reason being that it's testing how many people can stand on the bridge. The answer is 4,934 people, if you're wondering. But after that, it all started to become a bit more eye-rolling. The Tauros blocking the street in Howley City feels like a lamer version of what has been done countless times before, especially since we don't even get to battle it to calm it down, and it's all resolved through a cutscene. At least Gen 8's confrontation with Team Yell and the Sleeping City Cobra did that better. But of course, we cannot talk about roadblocks in Pokemon, especially when we've come to the negative side of things, without mentioning the power outages in Lumio City that caused several areas of the place to be inaccessible until later in the game. This one is infamous for how bad it is on so many different levels. First of all, why would a blackout make an entire part of a city off limits? I could understand it if you were in a car and Lumios had a ton of traffic lights, for example, but we're on foot. It's the middle of the day, who cares if the residents don't have electricity, I can just pass on through. But as you probably know, it being a nonsensical reason isn't even the worst part. If you play during the evening, you'll be treated to a surprising sight. The lights in the windows behind these workers are all on. So far for a blackout, huh? Furthermore, you also seem to be the only person affected by this area being off limits, as random NPCs can just walk past these workers and disappear into the void. Now, obviously I understand these last two were more so done out of convenience or laziness if you want to be more cynical, but what it shows most of all to me is a lack of interest in making these roadblocks fit the world. I don't hate roadblocks at all really, if you want your game to be linear, they're necessary. But the contrast between this blackout and say HMs couldn't be bigger. One prevents you from continuing through a pure truth of the world. It teases your desire to explore, to see more, but also makes it easy for you to realize why you can't do it yet. The other, it's just forced. It doesn't feel realistic, it doesn't feel believable, it reminds you that this is a video game and you are playing it the way Game Freak wants you to play it, and that's never good for immersion. If you're gonna do that, at least make me chuckle like Gen 5 did. I would say I hope Game Freak learns from that, but at this point, it doesn't feel like a lesson that needs to be learned anymore. Roadblocks are largely a thing of the past, a mechanic you may have even forgotten once existed. That's how quietly the series moved on. What are your favorite and most hated roadblocks in Pokémon? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Pokémon content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.